Deep in the wilds of North America, among all the known creatures of the forest, lives one that has persisted in myth for thousands of years. The Wildman, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. It's encountered every year by many unsuspecting individuals who venture out into nature, yet for some reason, it still eludes us. The wilderness has been largely explored, but the secrets of the Wildman still endure. People dedicate their lives to finding this missing link, but here's the thing. It's so much more than just a missing link. So much more. The Wildman is real, but the nature of its existence is stranger and far more connected to you than you could ever imagine. Tales of the Wildman go back far longer than most people think. Most of what you'll find online in terms of Sasquatch mythology is rooted in First Nations culture and lore. Stories of the Wildman exist in all tribes across North America, but Wildman mythology exists globally, and the stories go back many thousands of years. We know that at one point in our primitive history, us, Homo sapiens, existed alongside other upright hominids, battling it out for dominance and survival. Think of Neanderthal, or the Denisovans, or Homo heidelbergensis. For tens of thousands of years, these others were part of our world and daily life. You can imagine the lasting impact it would have had on our psyche in a generational sense. Every encounter, most of which would have been in a survival scenario, is imprinted onto the collective consciousness and passed down from generation to generation the same way biological information is. Our origins were literally that of wild men. We were forest dwellers, similar to the Sasquatch we see now, though obviously not as robust or elusive. These primitive encounters basically fused into a primal memory or psychological archetype that's been passed on until present day. It's literally called the Wildman archetype. What is an archetype? An archetype is a primordial pattern of thought, emotion, and experience. It's not the story or the myth itself, but more like the form that stories, myths, and dreams repeat. For example, the hero is an archetype. King Arthur, Gilgamesh, Chewbacca. They're all expressions of the same form. Carl Jung, the late and famous Swiss psychiatrist, thought of them as universal psychological templates or molds buried in the collective unconscious, the part of the psyche shared by all of humanity. It's worth noting that the collective unconscious and collective consciousness are describing the same thing. Archetypes emerge because humanity has faced the same fundamental experiences again and again. Birth, death, danger, love, betrayal, the wilderness. All of these experiences create different archetypes that emerge. They're not just in your head. Archetypes shape dreams, visions, art, religious experiences, and even paranormal encounters. They're psychic structures that bridge the inner and outer worlds. Joseph Campbell, the legendary and late authority on world mythology, showed that myths are stories built around archetypes. Archetypes are the bones and myths are the flesh. Without archetypes, stories wouldn't resonate across cultures. Archetypes appear in every culture, in every age, even when civilizations never contacted each other. Archetypes are essentially symbols that help us make sense of experiences that are beyond our basic logical understanding of the more mystical forces of life. The mother, the hero, the trickster, the wise old man, the wild man. These keep returning because they live deeper than culture, in the fabric of the human psyche, and perhaps in the fabric of reality itself. Let's have a look at one of these myths, just to see the archetypes at play. For this example, we'll use the oldest written myth in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is amazing because not only is it the oldest written myth, but it also happens to contain the first written archetype of the Wildman. The Epic of Gilgamesh is roughly 4,000 years old. It predates Homer by 1,000 years, and it wrestles with the same questions we still ask today. What does it mean to be human? What is our relationship to nature? What do we do with death? We've been grappling with these themes for a very long time. Here's a brief rundown of the story. Gilgamesh is the king of Uruk, a powerful city-state. He's 2/3 god, 1/3 man, blessed with strength, beauty, and wisdom. But he's arrogant, selfish, and abuses his power. He works his citizens to exhaustion. He sleeps with brides before their wedding nights. The people cry out to the gods for help. The gods respond by creating a counterpart to humble Gilgamesh. Enter Enkidu, the wild man. He lives in the forest covered in hair, runs with animals, drinks from rivers, completely untamed and innocent. A trapper sees him and fears him, and then a priestess prostitute named Shamhat is sent to civilize him. She seduces him for 6 days and 7 nights. After their union, the animals reject him. He has become human. Enkidu travels to Uruk and challenges Gilgamesh. They wrestle in a titanic battle. Neither one wins decisively, but in the struggle, respect is born. They become brothers, bonded by strength and fate. Bored with the palace life, Gilgamesh wants immortal glory. He convinces Enkidu to help him slay Humbaba, the guardian of the sacred cedar forest. Though Enkidu warns against it, they go anyway. They confront and kill Humbaba with divine help from the sun god Shamash. They chop down the trees and bring them back to Uruk. After their return, the goddess Ishtar proposes to Gilgamesh. He refuses her, reminding her of how she destroys her lovers. Ishtar, furious, sends the bull of heaven to punish him. Gilgamesh and Enkidu slay the bull together. At this point, they've defied the gods twice, and there must be a reckoning. The gods decide Enkidu must die. He becomes sick, curses Shamhat, but eventually blesses her. He dies slowly, painfully, and Gilgamesh is shattered. Gilgamesh, terrified of death, abandons his kingdom. He travels across deserts, mountains, and seas to find Utnapishtim, the immortal man. He finds out that death is woven into the fabric of life, and no one escapes it. He tells Gilgamesh the flood story, almost identical to Noah's Ark, where the gods once wiped out humanity. As a gift, the gods gave Utnapishtim and his wife immortality, a one-time exception. But Utnapishtim offers Gilgamesh a test. Stay awake for 7 days. Gilgamesh fails, sleeps for 7 straight days. His body betrays him. He cannot conquer death. As a parting gift, Utnapishtim gives him the plant of youth. Gilgamesh finds it and rejoices. But on the journey home, a serpent steals the plant and sheds its skin and slithers away. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk humbled. He surveys his city and takes pride in its walls. He realizes that legacy, wisdom, and love are the immortality that's allowed to humans. The epic ends with Gilgamesh no longer seeking to escape death, but to live with meaning before it. So we can see that the wildman archetype has been around for all of written history, and through time, as humans built cities and created laws, we repressed our primal instincts. Strength, wilderness, survival, rawness, all of that got pushed into the shadow. The wildman archetype was born as a mirror of what we excluded from civilized life. It became the embodiment of the forgotten self, the instincts we buried but never left. As time went on, the archetype solidified itself more and more into the collective psyche, becoming one of the most prominent and prolific symbols of man's relationship to the natural world. So how does the wildman archetype relate to modern-day Sasquatch encounters? People are seeing and experiencing something that shouldn't exist in our current historic and scientific paradigms. Witnesses report consistent traits: giant stature, lots of hair covering the body, large footprints, musky odor, strange sounds, howls, and wood knocks. But many encounters also have a paranormal edge. Disappearing tracks, sudden vanishings, glowing eyes, telepathic communications. Sasquatch blurs the line between flesh and myth, But in order to find out what is going on out there in the forests, we have to look at the nature of reality itself and how it all works. And this is where things get really interesting and also really, really weird. The reality you see in front of you is not a construct of solid matter. What we call physical is actually stabilized thought form. Matter is not actually solid. It's consciousness slowed down into perception. You are perceiving a 3D physical reality through consciousness. The crazy thing is that consciousness is shared, and the individuality you experience is essentially an illusion. Think of your individual consciousness as a finger on the hand of a greater collective consciousness that we're all tapped into without even realizing it. When one digs deep enough into the spiritual mysteries of the world, they will eventually come to discover that all consciousness and reality emanates from one source. A scientist may call it the quantum field, but others will call it God or God consciousness. You could even call it the Force. This force, or God consciousness, is an extremely intelligent and evolved cosmic mind of the highest order. It's not physical in its nature, but it exists in a spiritual sense as energy and thought. And it creates the reality you perceive by dreaming it into existence. It's not like a regular dream you experience at night. It's a highly advanced, persistent dream with multiple layers. Everything, and I mean literally everything in the universe, is advanced thought form being dreamt by this superintelligence or God consciousness. Everything here on Earth, all the other planets, other galaxies, the potential alien beings out there, the entire universe. Things here look and feel very real, but the same thing happens when you find yourself in a vivid dream at night. You don't even question the dream while you're in it. The same thing happens here at an extreme level. It seems crazy to us, but in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing to this cosmic mind. There's two layers to the dream. The collective dream, the map, or the stable 3D world we all share, the mountains, rivers, forests, stars. This comes from this God consciousness itself. The individual dream is the next layer, the experience. Within this shared map, each person's psyche and archetypes tailor their experiences and encounters. It's similar to a video game where the characters load into a map, except it's not a game. It's not a simulation. It's a highly advanced dream. We're all dream characters feeding data back to the source mind that was gathered through lived human experience. What is the point of this dream? What are we all doing here? Well, we're simply here to have experiences that stimulate conscious expansion and spiritual evolution. We do it through all the events we go through in life, good and bad. They're all necessary to create friction and struggle, which is where growth and evolution occurs. We experience good and evil, pain and pleasure, love and loss. And we also experience mystery. It's all to stimulate conscious evolution, and not just on the perceived individual level, but ultimately as the collective consciousness or God consciousness. It's like a self-evolving mind, imagining experiences for itself in order to learn and become more expansive and intelligent. You can also think of reality like a movie projection. What you and I perceive is the movie playing out. The projector is the God consciousness or God intelligence. The field of light, or the beam of light between us and God, is the collective unconscious, which can also be called your higher consciousness. It can even be called the spirit realm. Now, there's a lot of strange things that exist in the realm of higher consciousness, and sometimes they make themselves known to us in physical reality and in varying forms. The real question is, how does this even happen? We talked before about archetypes and how they formed as symbolic psychological templates over thousands of years of shared experience, embedding themselves in the collective unconscious. Each one of these archetypes exists at its own frequency and represents a certain aspect of human experience, perspective, and evolution. They are what myths are made of. They represent different aspects of the human psyche developed over time. The hero, the trickster, the sage, the wildman. When an individual shifts his or her vibrational frequency, either consciously or unconsciously, to match one of these archetypal frequencies, a mystical event is likely to occur. It's a conscious co-creation between you and your perceived individual psyche that consists of all your beliefs and psychological programming and the higher God consciousness. You align with the template, and God consciousness or your higher consciousness meets you halfway, and then boom, you encounter Sasquatch out in the woods somewhere. The experience that manifests is meant to expand your conscious perspective and stimulate spiritual evolution. It all has purpose. For Sasquatch and other paranormal phenomena, the nature of the experience and its purpose is likely to be no more than a mystery. A mystery that isn't meant to be solved, and therefore it won't be, because it already serves its purpose. It's all part of the deeply intricate collective dream we're all experiencing, to trigger a realization that there's more to this reality than what logic would have you think. Now, this doesn't diminish the experience at all in any way. It still happens, a very real event manifests, however its creation and manifestation is that of a deep quantum and spiritual nature. Even physical evidence is left behind in some cases, hair, footprints, scat. The event manifests in our perceived physical reality, yet it's brought into this reality by conscious co-creation and a matching of frequencies between us and the archetypal forms that exist in the collective unconscious. This applies to the UFO field as well. People have been looking up at the stars since the dawn of man, forming images or archetypes in the forms of constellations or different godlike characters that we see in ancient mythologies and world religions. If you're heavily focused on these star or cosmic archetypes, you may very well experience a mystical UFO event. Even UFOs themselves are now becoming more and more of their own archetype. The collective idea of them and what they look like solidifies into certain psychic forms that, when aligned with vibrationally, will appear in the collective dream space. Even in the field of ghosts and spirits, if one finds themselves aligned with, say, the trickster archetype, they may experience poltergeist activity or encounter a shadow entity. When people experience trauma like the death of a loved one, and then they see the ghost of that loved one afterwards, it's a conscious co-creation because the symbolic energy of that loved one is so clear and vibrationally alive in the person grieving. With all this stuff, it can happen consciously or unconsciously to the experiencer. It depends on their mental state, their current beliefs, feelings, their readiness, and also the environment they find themselves in. Think of the First Nations people. They were fully immersed in Wildman lore because that was the life they lived. They had stories passed down for thousands of years containing the Wildman archetype. They lived in constant vibrational alignment with it. It makes complete sense that they had countless mystical and deeply profound spiritual encounters with the Sasquatch. This also explains why the Wildman is a global myth, because it comes from the psyche and God mind within and is projected outward into the dream space to be experienced. It's not bound by physical geography and limitations. It's in the collective consciousness and can be tapped into from essentially anywhere in the world. However, you're most likely to be in proper vibration with it when you're out in the wilderness where you're naturally embodying your primitive Wildman spirit. It's also worth pointing out that this explanation accounts for discrepancies between Sasquatch reports. Some people see them differently, some see them the same. Some take more traditional and mainstream Sasquatch forms, and some not so much. An individual experiencer might have a different idea or belief of what the Sasquatch is or looks like, so they see it differently. In the case of Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, and the famous 1967 Patterson footage, they perceived the same archetypal projection because they were in more or less the same vibrational resonance field. They were close friends and shared a lot of the same ideas. Gimlin himself was Indigenous. He was also totally open to the possibilities, both from his own individual perspective and from an ancestral perspective. Patterson was totally obsessed with the mythology of Sasquatch, and he lived and breathed it every single day. It was his passion. They both tuned into the Wildman archetype, and in turn brought the mythology of Sasquatch into the global eye, causing countless individuals to open themselves up to the mystical possibilities of what could be out there. They helped expand the collective consciousness, to evolve it, and that was the entire purpose of the event. And here we are, still talking about it. So how do we move forward with this information? For those of us who are interested in the subject of Sasquatch or any of the paranormal mysteries of the world and wish to have a mystical or paranormal encounter, you can do everything you can to align yourself consciously with the archetypes that represent the mystery of your interest. If you do this long enough and get really good at it, and place yourself in an environment that carries the energy of that archetype, you're much more likely to come face to face with the Wildman or with a UFO, and so on. If you're not making a conscious effort, it can still happen, but the odds are significantly less, and you'll be of the belief that it's just a random event that happened to you. It's like what Carl Jung said, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate. And this is true. This information also applies to literally everything in your day-to-day life. We live in a seemingly chaotic world. To a lot of people these days, it's a wasteland and they struggle to navigate it and to make sense of it. What they don't realize is that they're unknowingly being controlled by archetypes that are not of their conscious choice. So things happen to them. Life gets tough, the struggle is overwhelming, they get depressed and spiral downwards. Life can become a living hellscape. Just look at all the crazy things going on in the world right now. The vast majority of people are unknowingly aligning with negative mythological archetypes, and it causes the collective consciousness to co-create more events of the same negative nature. It's highly recommended to look deep within yourself and to explore the archetypes of world mythologies, to be able to identify the archetypal frameworks that are governing your state of being. And once you can identify these archetypal forms, you can start to steer your behaviors and your choices to align more with positive, higher vibrational archetypes that bring about experiences of a more positive and higher vibrational nature. You'll find that the reality before you will start to change in seemingly magical ways. The easiest way to do this is to identify heroic mythological figures that you like and that you look up to. Those heroes are archetypal structures meant to give you an idea of the path to follow to discover your true self and the wild man within. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.